South Africa has lodged a case with the International Court of Justice, ICJ, accusing Israel of genocide during the Gaza war and seeking an emergency suspension of Israel's military campaign. The ICJ, or World Court, is a UN legal body designed to resolve state disputes, while the International Criminal Court, ICC, handles prosecutions against individuals charged with genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. Both Israel and South Africa are signatories to the 1948 Genocide Convention, giving the ICJ jurisdiction. The convention obligates states to abstain, prevent and punish genocide, defined as acts committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial or religious group. South Africa alleges that Israel caused harm and created conditions calculated to bring physical destruction, failing to prevent genocide and allowed officials to incite it. Hamas has applauded the lawsuit. Israel rejects the accusation as a blood libel, aimed to stir up anti-Semitism and support terror. It may challenge the court's jurisdiction to have the case thrown out before arguments, otherwise other convention signatories may apply for submissions. The hearings will take place on January 11 and 12, 2024. The court will initially need to determine its own jurisdiction, if Israel's acts fall within the scope of genocide and whether it should order provisional measures, while examining the case. The court's orders are final, binding and without appeal but are not enforced and could take years. Ordering Israel to halt its campaign would impact its reputation and set a legal precedent for countries facing terrorism. South Africa, or rather, the African National Congress, ANC, which has governed the country since 1994, has supported Palestinians for decades, sharing sentiments against oppression much like the Irish and accusing Israel of perpetrating an apartheid. They support Russia's invasion of Ukraine, have strengthened ties with the Chinese Communist Party which helps train ANC members and has growing ties with Iran, while relations with Israel have deteriorated. Israel's defense is expected to focus on its efforts to minimize Palestinian civilian casualties using flyers, text and recorded messages, public and social media announcements, making personal phone calls, guarding evacuation corridors and inspecting hundreds of aid trucks per day to protect civilians from harm, arguing a lack of intent for incrimination. Conversely, accusing Hamas of maximizing civilian casualties to sway public opinion against Israel, by stealing aid, using civilians as human shields, preventing them from getting to safety, building tunnels under residential areas, hospitals, mosques and schools and using those places to store weapons, coordinate and launch attacks and refusing to distinguish themselves from civilians, by using uniforms. Israel will contend that statements presented as evidence are rhetoric by politicians, not reflective of actual policy by decision-makers in the government or the armed forces, and reiterate their enemies are the terrorists and not the civilians, while some quotes shown as evidence conflate between the two or are taken out of context. It may also assert that lawfare against the only Jewish state is common in international politics and claim that this case is an abuse of the ICJ for political purposes, risking the court's credibility. Finally, Israel may argue that by seeking to prevent Israel from countering terrorists whose statements and actions amount to the genocide of Jews, South Africa violates its own obligations against genocide by enabling Hamas and other terror groups to continue committing such acts.